Hello. Today's lecture is dedicated to English 101, specifically the first paper that we write that is called Causal Argument. Sometimes students accidentally overlook and call it casual argument. So I want to clarify that there is no such thing as casual argument, but there is causal argument. It is similar to cause and effect paper that you are used to in your younger years, but it's taken a grade up. In a cause and effect paper, you clearly know that X causes Y. If I push the chair, it will fall. In the causal argument, however, we are arguing that X causes Y. However, it is not a fact. It is not a well-known fact. You have to argue that X, in fact, causes Y. In a moment, I'll give you a couple of topics and I will explain it further. But remember, the topic you want to choose is something that is arguable. If it is not arguable, if it's accepted more or less as a fact, then it's not an argument. It's just a cause and effect relationship. So beware of that. In order to help my students, I typically will give them a list of topics that they can choose from, and they are a little bit more suitable and less likely to turn into a cause and effect. All right? Even though your thesis statement will read X causes Y, it may also be, in fact, X does not cause Y. So you may want to write a paper in that kind of format. It could also be that X causes A, B, and C. You can argue about three different things, or three different things cause that one X. So let's look at the topics. The first one that I really like, and I suppose I look at it more as an outsider, someone who was not born in the United States, the popularity of fast food restaurants. First of all, what caused the fact that there is now a fast food restaurant on every corner? Just 50, 60 years ago, that was not the case. America did not look the way that it looks today. So what happened that had caused all these restaurants to appear all of a sudden? And there are multiple theories. Of course, the popularity, they gained popularity and became an acceptable, kind of like a common part of American life when women went to work in 1950s. So you could argue, you could write a really nice argument that the women's rights movements, among other things, had caused the rise in popularity of fast food restaurants, which in turn has changed the entire nation as far as eating habits. You could argue that women's rights movements have changed eating habits of America and had caused obesity. Women's rights movement has caused obesity. So all kinds of things that can come from here. Likewise, you could argue that World War II had caused obesity in the United States because it was World War II when the women had to go to work in the factories, and at the end of the war, they did not want to go back home, did not want to go back to the kitchens. They actually wanted to continue with their jobs. And so the women's rights movements kind of picked up over there, and most women did not return home to work at home as housewives. So all kinds of different interesting things here. And even the claim that fast food causes obesity is not necessarily cause and effect either. You could argue that there are multiple factors that contribute to that. So you do hear those arguments like, don't blame the fast food, blame the people, or blame the parents. So that's the kind of things you could look into in this paper. I'm looking at my topics down here, so I apologize, but I do look at my notes. Internet influence on kids. You could argue that obviously it does influence the children, but you could argue if that's a positive influence or a negative influence, and how exactly does it happen? Is it it's causing our mind to expand, our knowledge to be gained, or is it really ruining our children, controlling their minds, and so forth? The claim that enrolling children in professional sports, or any sports for that matter, will teach is really good for the children. It's like my favorite topic. Oh, it's so good. Like, people will claim that enrolling children in sports is going to teach them how to be a part of the team and set goals and how to win and da-da-da-da-da. And all these things are true, but are they really? I would argue that. I, for example, is not a person who's very athletic. So enrolling me in sports was the worst thing that my parents have ever done to me. I felt like a loser, an outsider. My self-esteem was down because I could not do what other kids could do. So I would actually write a paper, and that would be a great argument that enrolling children in sports is not the best, is not the best for them or something along those lines. Frankly, if you wanted a challenge, I would, you could choose a topic and write it in a format that you actually do not agree with. That would be a really good challenge. That would be interesting. It's easy to argue what you believe, and you find sources to believe what you want. Your mind naturally seeks those out. But try to expand your mind right on the topic on the flip side, the side you do not agree with, and see how your mind is seeking those little details from your research out. All right, another good topic that I really like, and a lot of students of divorced parents can relate to that, growing up in a single parent household. Many will argue that growing up in single parent household is, the kind of like old research is devastating to children. Their academics suffer, and the children become depressed, and on and on and on. Likewise, there's a lot of data that proves otherwise, that actually growing up with a single parent does not change anything for children. They're just as successful, if not more successful than others. And you could also take the effects of divorce on the children, that the old research, you could argue, is divorce is so terrible for the children and so forth. But now in the modern days, when every other couple is divorced, children are better adjusted. And there's nothing worse than living with two parents who fight. So really, that is still arguable whether divorce, it's not necessarily cause and effect relationship that divorce causes children to suffer. So that's a good topic that you could argue either way. Again, if you want to challenge, argue the side you don't agree with. Music effect on the human body. You could argue that it causes this or causes that. Studying arts. I just saw a typo down here. I'm sorry, so I got distracted. This is not my list. These are the lists I borrow from other teachers. Music effects on the human body, art, studying art. The argument is, should we study art? Should we take out the art? Should we take out PE out of public schools and so forth? So all these are interesting things to look into. Social media, I think this is kind of like a topic that's becoming overdone, but the effects of social media on young people. I think we're now established that Facebook just causes people to have low self-esteem because everyone else out there has better life than we do. But yet again, it's still a topic. Genetically engineered food. You could argue, and the producers of GMO food do argue, that this is the best way to feed the growing population. That we are, in fact, running out of food in the world. There's still not enough food in the world to feed all of us, as far as per person. So that's still a topic. Others will argue that genetically modified food is obviously genetically modified and is terrible for our health. And of course, GMO producers again will come around and say, no, it's very healthy. We tested it, it's great. So people still argue back and forth. Not enough time, supposed, had passed for us to really know the effects of these, but they are coming. Another interesting topic is a question: what causes racism, or what causes discrimination or dislike of other groups? Where is this coming from? Some people will argue that racism is taught. Others will argue no, it's like instinctual. I don't like anybody who's not like me. That it comes from times when we were all in separate little tribes, and everybody who was not us was automatically an enemy because they could come and take our resources. So what causes discrimination, racism, dislike for the other? Could look into that. That's a good topic. How credit cards affect our lifestyles. Obviously, the credit card companies will tell you how you must have it, and it's just the greatest thing in the world if you do have good credit. But you could also show a lot of beyond the obvious that people, of course, get in credit card debt and it really haunts them for most of their life. But you could probably look into how people think differently about money and how we're becoming a cashless society, and how I think the millennials are probably affected by it the most. Again, if you're the millennial, you may not see that. It may be difficult for you to analyze yourself from the outside, so to speak, but the generation before you, just such as myself, Generation X, we can see that, how you are affected, but you could look into that. Effects of homeschooling. Does homeschooling cause better academic performance, which I have seen, or does it cause lack of social skills, or does it not cause lack of social skills? Whatever you want to argue, you can do that. I actually have seen all of these as true and not true in my students, so I don't know what I would argue here. Effects of online dating. I think it used to be such a taboo to date online, and now I think that's pretty much the number one way to meet people. So we could argue, how does it change the dating scene, or how does it change how does it really change our perception of dating and romantic relationships and so forth? I would look into that. How Uber has influenced the business of taxi drivers, you could look into that. Or, of course, Uber delivery food systems, how we now don't even want to go out and get our own food. Or, all these home deliveries, what are they really doing? What really caused it? What shift in society had caused the need for these services? So many ways you could develop the topic in different directions. So I think that's the rest of my couple of suggested topics that I had for you in mind. I do have more lists. There should be a list uploaded to Blackboard. I have like one generic list that works pretty much for every paper, and then there are a couple of topics that I like to use as examples for the specific paper. So again, your thesis statement should read X causes Y or X does not cause Y, and make sure that it is not just a cause and effect relationship that is predictable, rather that it's an argument that it can be argued either way. You have to have at least 50% opposing to your idea, and that's how you know you got a good argument. Okay, so we will be using, as of now, I am in 2019, we will be using APA documentation style. If you are writing, especially if you're writing in social sciences, that most of students fall into that. If you're not, we could always change to MLA. So you can always ask me in class, text me, email me, Skype me, FaceTime me, or Blackboard me. Have a good day.